Well, folks, we are down to two teams in the Big D's divisional preview, and today it's the NFC East, aka the NFC East, on the Big D podcast. Before I bring in Alice to talk all things Cowboys, Eagles, Giants, and Commanders, please subscribe, like, and share the Spunky Spectrum Sports YouTube page. See online content, videos, streams. I may be running the 100-meter dash, or I might be doing a marathon. Also, check out the Big D podcast for the audio listeners, Spotify and Apple. So, joining me, the only guy who thinks he could run 100 meters faster than Noah Lyles, throw a discus pass, Valerie Ullman, a shot put past Ryan Krauser, and swim the 1,500 meters faster than Katie Ledecky. Alex. So, Alex, could you really do all four of those things?
I definitely don't think so. When it comes to Olympics, I'll join the table tennis group, and I'll see how I fare against those guys. But no, it's been first off, thank you for the great introduction as always, Dylan. It's been great watching these Olympics and obviously cheering on the USA going for gold and all of the different Summer Olympic events. So it's an honor to have my name in the same sentence as all of those goats. But it's definitely been a blast for sure.
Yeah. If only I could get a few medals for the Stars and Stripes in Petty. So, back to football. I have you know what the famous phrase is about the America's team?
What is that?
How about them Cowboys?
Yeah. How
So,
about
I don't know about you, but the Dallas Cowboys have been in the news for seemingly neglecting to pay anybody. I mean, CeeDee Lamb, Myles Garrett, Dak Prescott. I mean, Jerry Jones said the Cowboys were, quote, all in.
Yeah.
Well, like all into not spending a dime, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty crazy when one of the most notable players you brought in to your franchise is the return of Ezekiel Elliott. I mean, it's definitely been quiet from the Cowboys. I mean, they finished the season obviously 12-5 last season, which going into the playoffs, it's a respectable record. But knowing the Dallas Cowboys, you're gonna have to have better than that to be able to make a serious playoff run. We've seen them choke in the past in the playoffs. We saw it again last season, obviously falling to the Green Bay Packers. But definitely didn't end the way that Cowboys fans and the Dallas Cowboys in general had expected it to. And I think, like you said, Cowboys fans this offseason were kind of chomping at the bit, trying to see what moves that they were going to make. Obviously you want to make sure you get CeeDee Lamb locked down to be a Dallas Cowboy for a very long time. And as you said, it was definitely underwhelming at best. They lose Tony Pollard, and your bunch of different running backs obviously on the market. It was a very hot free agency at the running back position this year, and I think they brought in Royce Freeman as well as bringing back Ezekiel Elliott. So obviously didn't fill that hole with much substantial replacements there, and just kind of seemed to be a mindset of we had a successful season last year. Let's run it back. I mean, they might be happy with their team, but there's definitely some areas where, they could definitely use some improvements.
Yeah, I feel like in a way the Cowboys are always in the news for just whatever. I mean, Jerry Jones does a radio show. How many owners have a radio show? But everybody's saying the Cowboys are a Super Bowl team. Dak Prescott's a top 4 quarterback. I mean, where was Dak in the NFL top 100 rankings?
Yeah.
But yet, in terms of objectively, looking at quarterback rankings, Dak's not in my top 12 quarterback rankings right now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough. Obviously, you've got some certain expectations when it comes to the Jerry show, when it comes to, being a Dallas Cowboy in general. And, I think at the end of the day, what Cowboys fans want more than anything is success in the playoffs, very similar to us Dolphins. It hasn't been, at least, on the Cowboys' sake, they've been able to get to the playoffs. It's just finding the success once they get there. And, it's hard to really classify Dak Prescott as one of those elite, top tier players at the quarterback position if he can't get over that hump. And obviously, the NFL playoffs are a gauntlet of super teams at that point of the season, but you have to have at least some sort of notion that you're going to be able to succeed at that point. And I think with Dak, it's been one of the pitfalls of his career so far. Obviously with CeeDee Lamb, top 3 wide receiver in the National Football League, you can't say he doesn't have the weapons to throw to. He's also had some great role players who have stepped up and really, made some plays on the offensive side of the ball for him. So it's really just about taking that next step and really kind of finding their stride once December and January football comes along.
Yeah, I mean, is Dak Prescott a bad quarterback? No. Is Dak Prescott a great quarterback? No. He's in that probably 13 to 18 quarterback range. And I feel like you know what you're getting with Dak. I mean, he's okay. He's an okay mover, not a great mover. He's got an arm, but it's not Patrick Mahomes. It's not Josh Allen. I mean, I look at him leadership-wise, but Dak's a guy who needs a strong run game, really good O-line and weapons. Sort of like maybe Brock Purdy. I mean, when Dak Prescott was great, Ezekiel Elliott was great. The Cowboys seemingly were better. Now with Dak making 40-something million a year, Zeke well past his prime. Who knows if CeeDee Lamb's back? The Cowboy offense line changing. I feel like, I mean, yes, the Cowboys will probably give Dak a contract because that's what Jerry Jones always does.
Yeah.
But if this season goes bad, I sort of wouldn't mind the Cowboys move on from Dak because, I mean, look at the teams that could make a move for Dak. You look at New England, you look at Las Vegas, heck, the Giants.
Yeah.
So it's going to be an odd season. And I know you have a question for me.
I do. I'm just curious, Dylan. Obviously, the Cowboys have whether they earned it or not, have obtained the moniker of America's team. And there's always a lot of hype when it comes to the Cowboys going into the season. I'm just curious, from the perspective around fans and around the league in general, would you consider the Cowboys being overrated going into this season?
The Cowboys are not just the NFL's most overrated team. You could argue in many ways the Cowboys are the most overrated team in sports. This is a team that hasn't won a Super Bowl since William Jefferson Clinton was in office in the middle 1990s. I mean, Bill Cowell was a young pup with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Heck, Randall Cunningham, Dan Marino, John Elway were playing. Peyton Manning was still a sophomore at the University of Tennessee. And to me, Jerry Jones is not about winning Super Bowls. He's about being in the news. He's got a yacht. I mean, the Cowboys are what? Well, $7 or $8 billion. So Jerry Jones is not about winning Super Bowls. He's about being in the news. And that's what, and I think owners in maybe Kansas City and Baltimore are more into winning Super Bowls. I don't know about you, but I like trophies.
Yeah. It's an interesting point, and I definitely think you have you make a really strong point when it comes to a big factor when it comes to Jerry Jones is, just having that name recognition. Obviously, they've got the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders, which bring in crowds. They've got all these different revenues of, creating that stadium was a huge piece to get their name out there to almost, it's Jerry's world. It's kind of like for lack of a better term, a circus that they can kind of, have these different shows and different stops and different attention grabbers that kind of grow out. But at the end of the day, it's about winning football games. Now, where I'm going to counter you on that is just say, the last Dallas Cowboys Super Bowl win was in the 80s or whatever. Are the Detroit Lions overrated this season? When was their last Super Bowl win? Are the Buffalo Bills? I mean, the Buffalo Bills might be a little overrated this season, but I don't know if you can necessarily judge a current team's overratedness based on, previous Super Bowl participants. I mean, really the only thing you're looking at the Chiefs and the Patriots when it comes to, I mean, obviously I know the Ravens have won one, the Niners have won one. But when it comes to recent Super Bowl appearances, obviously those are the main two teams you think about. So I think you might have stacked it on a little too tough there when it comes to Super Bowl success. When it comes to the Cowboys, I think they are overrated and for many different reasons. But I just wanted to counter you on that one.
Okay, so wait. So if the Cowboys win a Super Bowl this year, Dallas is no longer overrated, right?
Correct. If the Cowboys win a Super Bowl this year, they are no longer overrated.
But they won't win a Super Bowl.
I don't think they will. But if they do.
I've got an interesting question. Mike McCarthy's up for a new deal, and we saw what happened when the last coach was going into his contract year, and then Jason Garrett didn't stay.
Yeah.
3 words or less. Is this Mike McCarthy's last year in Big D?
No. I think he'll do just enough to keep his name off the hot seat, but it'll still be underwhelming at the end of the day.
I've got an easy phrase. Bye-bye.
There you go. All right.
Is this Dak Prescott's last year in Big D?
It very well could. It's just tough. I mean, because in my opinion, if they end at 9 or 10 wins, maybe a wild card spot or, maybe one game out of the playoffs, like, is that enough to bump out both McCarthy and Dak? Probably. If you make the playoffs and have a first round exit, is that enough to bump out Dak and McCarthy? I don't know. If you win one, like, where is the point to where you can say, okay, this was a good season, we can move forward from this without burning the ship down and rebuilding,
No. Dak Prescott will be the Cowboys quarterback. Jerry Jones giving Dak a big deal, whether it's now or in February.
Right. Yeah. No, I think it's too. He's good enough, and I think it was kind of this. And this was the same argument I was making to people about Tua in that situation, which we'll obviously talk about more in the next episode. But I think Dak Prescott, you don't really have an option but to pay him. I mean, you've got talent on your roster. You've got good enough players to make a run, at least at trying to make the playoffs and win a couple games in the playoffs. You're starting over if you move on from Dak Prescott. You're not going to be able to get a free agent who's really going to be able to step in and provide the same amount of value, in my opinion. And if you want to go the rookie route, you're totally open. You're totally free and able to do that. But unless you pick up another CJ Stroud, it's going to be at least, a year, 2 or 3, maybe even more than that before you start seeing results there. So, if they want to, completely rebuild and start over, then you can move on from Dak. But I think if you want any sort of stability and keeping that floor of your record at that 8-9 wins, and obviously shooting for much more than that, then I think you've got to stick with where you are.
So now we head from Big D to the city of brotherly love, where we know Philadelphia is known for Philly cheesesteaks. And the question is, what Jalen Hurts are we going to see this year? Because in 2022, Jalen Hurts looked like an MVP candidate. But last year, especially toward the end of the season, Jalen Hurts regressed. So, I mean, it seemed like Shane Steichen made a huge difference for Jalen Hurts, but now he's in Indianapolis. New offensive coordinator comes from the Chargers. Kellen Moore, he used to be Dallas's OC, now he's in Philly. So, what do you see from Jalen Hurts and the Eagles this year? Because I have no idea what to expect from Philly.
Yeah, I mean, Philly is definitely going to be an interesting team to keep an eye on this season. They look like world beaters, to start the season. And then after an absolute dismantling by the San Francisco 49ers, it really looked like the Niners showed the NFL how to beat the Eagles. And I think we all know how the rest of the season finished from there. I think they finished 1-6, including playoffs in their last 7 games of the season. So it's definitely going to be interesting. Obviously, I think one of their biggest storylines this offseason was Losing Jason Kelce, we know he's been a stalwart of that interior offensive line for the Eagles for, as long as I can remember. Seems like we've seen that 62 Kelce there in the playing center for them. And again, as you said, it really comes down to Jalen Hurts and what we're going to see from him. I've heard reports from Eagles training camp that this is the best that Jalen Hurts has ever looked. Obviously, it's training camp. You have to take that with a grain of salt. I think I heard them say he hasn't thrown an interception yet in training camp so far or something like that, which, again, you have to take with a grain of salt. It's obviously not players going 100%, but you're still having those bubble guys who are still trying to make plays and really disrupt things. So, it's quite an interesting situation. Obviously, the other storyline that we hadn't touched on yet is Saquon Barkley, pulling him from a division rival, the New York Giants. I do think that's going to be massive for the Eagles. I think, yes, Saquon Barkley is getting to, the downstage of his career, but I do think he still has at least a couple years of solid productivity left, and I think that Eagles offense is a great landing spot for him. Jalen Hurts, with his mobility, can take some of the pressure off Saquon. Saquon won't have to take every single 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1 or 3rd and goal or 4th and goal. They have Jalen Hurts to kind of even monitor Jalen Hurts' durability a little bit by giving Saquon the ball in those instances a little bit more, or on the flip side, giving it to Hurts, to kind of monitor Saquon. I think it's going to be a really solid duo in the backfield there, and honestly, I have high expectations for the Eagles this season. I really think that they can self-reflect at the end of last season, figure out where things went wrong, and really start turning it around. I don't think that they lost enough talent that they didn't either replace or make up for in other areas to really make them any significantly worse off than last season. I see the Eagles making the playoffs, and I really think their ceiling is as high as some of the best teams in the NFC.
I'm intrigued how the Eagles run the touch push without Jason Kelce, but there's a lot I like about this team. Quarterback, I do think the new coordinators will make a big difference because Vic Fangio's been around a long time and it never looked quite the same in Miami.
Yeah.
But in Philadelphia, he's got guys who've been around a long time. So I feel that might be the perfect place for him. I think the Eagles have to get AJ Brown going and going more consistent because that guy's got uber talent. I mean, I love Devontae Smith. I think Devontae Smith might play out the slot this year, which is, I think, a scary proposition because if you put him on a safety or linebacker, everybody in the SEC knows what he did in 2020.
Yeah.
And then Saquon, I think this Eagles team's got huge expectations. Excuse me, but huge pressure because if this season goes bad, guess who's getting fired? The head coach. I mean, we saw Jeffrey Lurie get rid of 2 Super Bowl head coaches.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I don't think, especially after the end of the season last year, I think even Eagles fans, we're starting to have a little bit of a conflict in the back of their head. Is he the guy who's going to be able to take us over to that next step? And one thing that we've obviously touched, I totally agree with you when it comes to, oh my gosh, not Devontae Smith, AJ Brown. I totally agree with you when it comes to AJ Brown. He's got to step up. He's got to be the number 1 guy. But having Devontae Smith is as good of a wide receiver too as you can get in the NFL. I mean, definitely top 3 when it comes to wide receiver duos, and they're probably not 3. But one thing I do want to touch on really quick is I just want to read off some names for you. Hassan Reddick. We'll go Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Devin White, Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell. Those are all defensive additions that this Philadelphia Eagles team made.
I like all of them. I mean, Quinyon Mitchell was the guy I hope the Jaguars were taking the draft from corner from Toledo.
Yeah. And I think, as you mentioned, Vic Fangio, obviously he didn't have the success that I think most Dolphins fans had hoped for and had expected. from such a storied defensive coordinator. But I think Dolphins fans knew that Vic Fangio didn't want to be there last season. It wasn't the system. It wasn't the right, just everything for Vic Fangio. And, I think we've heard reports through the offseason and before he got hired with the Eagles that it was pretty much Vic Fangio was going to the Philadelphia Eagles. I wasn't surprised when they made the announcement. It had been kind of a known thing at least down in Miami, that he wanted to go to the Eagles. So I think we're going to see a different Vic Fangio this season, especially with those names I just mentioned, some new toys that he's going to have to play with, and really be able to kind of mold that defense into his own, with a significant number of guys coming in and having to learn a new defense either way. So, I definitely think that they've made some great additions on the defensive side of the ball. They obviously have the weapons on the offensive side, and it's a team that, as we both have kind of touched on, potential-wise, I think is as high as anyone in the NFC.
And maybe comes in probably one of not the NFL's biggest question markets, because it doesn't matter. It could be not Facebook, football, baseball. Philadelphia fans care. They're boosting. They're cheer you if you do well, but they will boo you if you suck. They booed Santa Claus and won't be afraid to boo you if you poop your pants.
You're exactly right about that. It's city to brotherly love or not, whichever. It just depends on if the Eagles are winning.
So halfway in the NFC East. So you know where we're going next?
Sure do.
The New York
Football
Giants. So there are all changes in New York. No Saquon Barkley there. Daniel Jones, knock on wood, back from his knee injury. Although seemingly Daniel Jones doesn't like being a part of Hard Knocks. Who does? I don't think anybody wants Hard Knocks. And from what I've seen in training camp, the New York Giants have a different spunk about them. Have you heard reports about New York and the Lions fighting each other in practice?
Yeah.
But what do you see from this Giant team this year? Because honestly, there's not a lot that excites me about this team.
No, I'm right there with you. I'm kind of looking through the roster here. Honestly, I think that they were lucky to get 6 wins last season. I think they probably overperformed their roster, and that was with Saquon Barkley. I just spent a couple minutes talking about how big of a contributor I think he could be to that Philadelphia Eagles offense, and everything that he can do for that Eagles offense is something that an already weak New York Giants offense is going to be losing. So, there's not a lot that excites me on paper. There's not a lot of offseason additions that they made. I guess the number one thing that stands out to me is Malik Neighbors. He's a great talent at the wide receiver position. He's going to be, I sure hope he's going to be Daniel Jones' number one option. If not, then we've got some other questions to be answered. But, I just don't think that he's going to be enough to really pull this team together to have any sort of success. Daniel Jones is who we thought he was, in my opinion. I think his contract extension was one of the most boneheaded moves in front office history, at least.
I think we know what the number one move would be. Daniel Jones would be number 2, right? And you could probably guess who number 1 is, right?
Number 1 for me is always signing Dante Culpepper over Drew Brees, but
no, in recent time, number one's a quarterback who might get Brandon Ayuk in a day.
Oh yeah, Deshaun Watson. Oh yeah, that's a whole different.
Yeah, but
at least Deshaun Watson. He had a better year than Daniel Jones did last year.
I don't know which one. I don't know what's better, having a shoulder injury or having a knee injury. Neither one looks good.
That's true. But pretty much, long story short, I don't think that they brought in nearly enough pieces to make this to make a competitive run this season. They lost way more than they gained. we'll see if they have stability at the quarterback position this year. Obviously, they had a bit of a three-headed monster with Tommy DeVito, Tyrod Taylor, and Daniel Jones last season. I think they're planning on just sticking it out with Daniel Jones. Who knows how that's going to work out for them? I can't expect it to go too well, but I don't see the pieces. They brought in Devin Singletary to replace Saquon, and that is such a downgrade. It's really not even funny.
I don't think Devin Singletary's a real downgrade. I mean, I think Singletary's got some ability. The problem is, I don't care. I don't care if you're Jaden Daniels. I don't care if you're Lamar. That offensive line is just so bad.
Yeah, you're right. It's
And,
yeah.
And be honest with you, I don't think Daniel Jones is long for New York.
Yeah. I just don't understand the contract extension. Like why they threw that much money at him. What they saw out of him. It just looked like a panic move, and it looked like a decision that I don't know. It's like when Bill Belichick's dog was sitting in front of the computer on draft day. Like I feel like he might have clicked a couple buttons and accidentally sent Daniel Jones a contract. I don't know. I don't know what happened, but I don't understand it. I'll tell you that much.
No, you know what happened? The Giants still think of Daniel Jones like he's Eli Manning 2.0 and didn't want to upset him. Plus, Daniel Jones beat the Minnesota Vikings. By the way, the Minnesota Vikings that year made Daniel Jones look like he was Peyton Manning thrown for 55 touchdowns.
Yeah.
The Vikings couldn't stop a nosebleed. Or using my favorite golf terminology, the Vikings defense couldn't hit water if they
fell out of a boat.
Correct. But at least the Giants this year. I mean, the Giants did add Brian Burns from Carolina, so he'll provide a pass rush. Thibodeau's a really good young player from Oregon, but this Giant team is still eons away from contending.
Yeah. I don't see them as the number one pick in the draft next season per se, but I can very comfortably put them at anywhere between 4 to 7 wins next season. I think is right around where they ended last year, and even that might be a little high for them, but. I think moving forward, not much more to talk over when it comes to the New York Giants, I don't think. But let's move over to our nation's capital, the Washington Commanders. And obviously, with a new addition at the quarterback position, a new addition in the head coach's office, moving on from Ron Rivera to Dan Quinn, and moving from Sam Howell to Jaden Daniels. With this new look Washington Commanders, and they are definitely new look. I lost count on the number of offseason additions that they made this season, but curious, Dylan, what do you think we're going to see from a new look Washington Commanders this season?
I think the Washington Commanders are going to be this year's Houston Texans. There's a lot I like about this team: new ownership, new GM, new head coach, and new quarterback. This team's. But the moves Washington made this year, really smart, veteran moves. Unlike the previous regime, which seemingly the Washington Commanders or Redskins in their heyday would spend money on Albert Hainsworth, on Deion Sanders, on Bruce Smith, or Adam Archuleta. And seemingly the Washington Redskins / Commanders would always win free agency.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this year, the Commanders didn't make the sexy move. They didn't make the sexy pick. They brought in good football players.
Yeah.
You bring in guys, you don't want to. Free agency helps, but free agency doesn't determine who wins Super Bowls. You win by the draft. And I love what the Commanders did. Jaden Daniels, I mean, he's probably a little too skinny for me, but I think Jaden Daniels is ready to play now. He set all kinds of records. He set all kinds of records at LSU last year. And this is a guy who I think, with Washington's offensive line still developing for the first couple of years, can really move. He's got an arm. And maybe with Washington this year, we can see the real Terry McLaurin because goodness knows how many quarterbacks that guy's played with. That guy's played with more quarterbacks than the Cleveland Browns have seen in the last 25 years.
Honestly, I think you made a great pretty much synopsis there. They were smart football moves. They lost a couple players. I mean, I'm very excited about Kendall Fuller, who Miami brought in, but even they still replaced him in the second round of the draft. And there's a lot of pieces I really like. A big part of it is really what we're going to see from Jaden Daniels. How quickly he can contribute, when it comes to the speed of an NFL game. But they sure have pieces around him to help him out. I mean, they've got, I don't know if you can call it a three-headed monster at the running back position, but they've got three very capable running backs. Obviously bringing in Austin Eckler from the Chargers. He's definitely on the downside of his career, but, he is a great football mind, as you kind of mentioned previously. I think he's going to be a great locker room guy and a great leader in that team, especially since it's kind of a brand new regime. You need those guys who have been in the league for a while, who have respect around the league and can really command a locker room, no pun intended. Following up behind him, you've got two other running backs who, I think are very solid contributors as well.
Brian Robinson
and even Antonio Gibson. I mean, he's,
if not for Antonio Gibson being in New England.
That's right. Totally forgot about that. But they brought someone else in, didn't they? I thought they brought in one more running back, but I could be wrong about that. Whatever. Either way, they still got Austin Eckler and Brian Robinson, and as you mentioned, Terry McLaurin is a great weapon on the outside as well. So I think they've got some pieces. The biggest question mark is going to be how Jaden Daniel plays and if they can really gel, because it is really a full kind of rebuild renovation from top to bottom there. But the good news is the only place they can go is up. They finished 4-13 last season. I think the standards are definitely going to be placed higher than that. And, you're kind of playing with house money this season. It's the first year of a new regime. And if you can put all the pieces together, as you said at the top of this segment, we could see the Houston Texans of last year. But it really just kind of determines on how quickly they can gel, how quickly those pieces can really fit together. And the play of Jaden McDaniels is really what it's going to come down to. I think top ceiling, they could even potentially be looking at a wild card spot if the pieces fall correctly. I think more realistic expectations is probably a little bit closer to 500, maybe trying to top over 500, would be a realistic goal for them. But, why not shoot for the playoffs?
Yeah, especially for a team that's not used to a lot of playoffs. It's like, when was Washington, look up when was Washington's last playoff win? Probably. Gosh. I'm thinking off the top of my head, when was Washington's last playoff win?
2005, they beat the Tampa Bay Bucks 17 wild card round.
Oh, I think that was with Joe Gibbs.
Sounds about right.
And then they lost to the Seahawks.
Yeah.
That was the Sean Alexander Seahawks, right?
Had to have been, yeah.
All right. You get to ask the question today. You get to ask the question, the almighty question. It's been 20 years since the Philadelphia Eagles repeated in 03 and 04.
Yep. I think that only leads to ask. There hasn't been a repeat division champion in this division in 20 years, as you just mentioned. Are we finally going to see that break streak, or are we in for more of the same and making it 21 this season, Dylan?
This is my boldest divisional pick of the year. I'm going Washington Commanders to win the NFC East. I think Jaden Daniels leads the Commanders to the division title, just like C.J. Stroud and the Texans did last year. Like this Commander team, I think Dan Quinn especially with Cliff Kingsbury as his OC, will work, will gel, and this Commander team wins the NFC East.
Wow. Hot take. You heard it here first. Ladies and gentlemen, get your bets in for Washington Commanders to win the NFC East per the Big D himself.
And now Jane Daniels is probably going to tear his ACL in the first preseason game, and I'm going to look like an idiot.
We got to knock on some wood around here somewhere. But yeah, no, I mean, it's like I said, I even said, why not shoot for the playoffs? I mean, I didn't necessarily see division champions in their future for this year, but I think we're on a very similar page there. If all the pieces fall together, I could definitely see them putting together a nice season here. But I think it will be an uphill battle. It's a lot of acclimating. It's a lot of gelling that locker room's going to have to do. This is really the time right now in training camp where you've got to set that foundation and set that basis that, we have the same goal. We're in it together, and, we want to make something happen for the fans of the Washington Commanders, because I think it's been quite some time since we've seen much of some success from them, as you've mentioned.
And does that mean you're picking the Eagles to win the NFC East?
Yeah, this is a tough division for me to predict this year. I think, I don't have too much faith in the Cowboys. I think, Washington has some potential, but I don't think they're quite there yet. So, yeah, I think I am going to go Philadelphia Eagles to take the NFC East this year.
Chalky.
Don't worry, next episode will be a little different.
All right, so thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Big D podcast as we previewed the NFC East. 7 divisions down, 1 division left. What division haven't we done yet?
Let me see. We've talked about a bunch of different teams. We talked about the Jaguars yet?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, must be Miami Dolphins.
Yeah, that means we have the AFC East left to do.
Yeah, can't wait for that one. You're definitely going to want to tune in for that. I've got maybe not as hot of a take as the Commanders winning the NFC East, but I definitely have a pretty hot take going into that division preview, and some opinions that might not be too well respected by some people, but you're going to have to tune in next time to find out. Fins up.